So my name is Jeanette Chavarria Torres, and I was born in Franklin Park, Illinois.
Okay, thank you. And can you tell me the names of your parents, where they were born, and maybe a little bit that we should know about your mom and your dad?
So my mom and my dad were born in San Luis Potosí, Mexico, in a small town called Santa Maria del Rio. Even though they were in the same, let's just say, county, my mom was more in a ranch, and my dad was more on the Sierra side. I think one thing that I know from them, that they've always been very hardworking. Even my mom had her own little store at one point, and my dad, at a very young age, he was a really good, what is it called when, he just knew how to, like, raise cattle. He was a farmer. So again, in that lifestyle, that's where you learn what to do. They don't come from like high education. They only went up to the 6th grade. So yeah, that's a little bit about them.
And you've told me a little bit about the place that your dad came from and how you've reflected a little bit on, your dad coming from the mountains, from the Sierra. Can you tell me a little bit about the place that your dad grew up?
So there's definitely a lot of limited resources over there. So there's not a lot of availability of water. They barely got electricity about 5 years ago. So can you imagine like not growing up with electricity or just, sewer? So I always go back and I think as I stand on top of these mountains, because they're literally mountains. And my dad always says that at a very young age, he stood up there as he was, hurdling in the cattle, that he didn't see a future there, that he needed to get out of there. And I could see why now. The possibilities were just not there for him to advance. So that's when he decided, to come to the United States.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell me a little bit about your parents' migration story to the U.S.? Did they meet in Mexico or did they meet in the U.S.? And what were their early years in the U.S. like, from what you know?
So my mom and dad started dating when they were in their early or mid-teens. And then about 2 months after they started dating, my dad decided to come to the United States. So they had a very short-lived relationship, and my dad would come back and forth for 3 years until they got married. My mom did say at one point she was getting a little antsy, and my dad, was like, "No, we're gonna make this happen." So then, after 3 years of long-distance dating, they finally planned the wedding, and they got married at 21 and 23, and that's when my dad left first, and then he decided to bring my mom to the United States. So that's kind of how their love story happened.
Yeah. And you mentioned to me that you feel like you're very lucky that you have the parents that you do. What did you mean by that?
I really do think that when they decided to come together and build a family, they took that super serious, and they were going to dedicate 120% of themselves to their children. My mom was always a stay-at-home mom because my dad didn't believe in sending your kids to childcare. So I don't know what it feels not to come home to a parent. My mom was always there. My dad always worked, always was the provider. He always felt that he had that financial responsibility to give us a better life, better opportunities. And I would say we were lower middle class from the beginning, since they started to have children. And that's always been because of my dad's entrepreneurial spirit, where he would learn a skill, but he hated working for someone else. Then he's like, I could do this by myself. So he's been an entrepreneur since his early 20s, and he hasn't stopped since. He's owned multiple businesses. Mm-hmm. He knows how to pivot very well.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like maybe you learned a little of that from
him.
You mentioned previously that your dad had a bit of a tough experience in the trucking industry and that influenced you. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so my dad, he owned a very successful trucking business and he was doing very well. But he worked for one specific trucking contractor. You know, when you don't know your rights, when you're just kind of working hard and they start, you know, not paying you, you don't think much of it because you've been working for this person for so many years as a subcontractor. He didn't know about the mechanic liens, about the rights that you have if someone owes you money. Unfortunately, it just too much time passed where this person filed bankruptcy, ended up owing my dad about $150,000. And unfortunately, that all happened as the recession was coming in 2009. And I remember because my dad always would make me translate everything for him. He knows how to read and he can have a conversation, but you know, his strength is not, his English is not super good. So at 10, I became his translator and his bookkeeper and everything. And I remember reading that letter that we had to go to the Daily Center, you know, for the judge to see, could we even get a part of what is owed to us? And at 15 years old, going into the Daily Center and them saying there's nothing you can do about it because he owed the IRS. The IRS was going to take anything he had first. I remember coming home and I have this image. I mean, if I was 15, he had probably 4 other kids younger than 15. So we were a really young family. He was flipping at tortillas on a comal and says like, I'm not worried about me, I'm worried about you guys and how I'm gonna provide for you guys. And it was just a downward spiral at that point. I mean, the recession, it was just terrible. We lost our home. That was very painful to have like a Cook County letter right there, like you're getting evicted. We're a big family, 6 plus 2, that's 8. To find an apartment, it took us forever to find a home that we could actually rent. But you know what? I just never saw him give up. And that was just really important to me, and I think to my siblings too. Because he would always say, I don't care if I have to go pick up cans, you guys, I'm gonna put you guys through college. And he did. 5 out of the 6, we all have a 4-year degree. And the one that doesn't have a 4-year degree, he's been part of the company since he's 18. He's our senior driver, one of our best drivers that we have. So I think that hardship just made us work harder too as children. To having a stable home, to then all of a sudden not having that. We just really, I think my siblings and I really just do it for our parents. Like they're just so important to us.
Yeah, wow, that's an incredible story. And I imagine, 15 is a tough age anyways, and to go through all that and to, you know, be helping your parents and feeling that responsibility. How do you feel like that experience of, you know, losing the home and seeing your parents struggling, how did that shape you?
Faster, definitely, than my peers, where they didn't have those type of worries. It made me really focus on what I wanted. And I almost became obsessed with, I have to get this done. I have to go to college. I have to, you know, open the business, and I have to get us back on our feet. I have to recuperate a house for my parents. And it's so crazy because that happened 10 years ago. 11 years ago, we lost our home. On November 18th coming up, I'm about to sign a house for my parents. And my dad didn't want to buy a home because he was paying tuitions. He's like, my priority is to pay you guys to go through college, to help you in whatever way I can. And he just made his last tuition payment to DePaul in June because my little brother graduated in June. So then that's when when I had, even though it's going to be under my name, it's for my parents. Because his credit and all that stuff, he hasn't been able to build it up the way that he wants to. But that's a big accomplishment for us. I feel like I finally, with my success, I'm able to help them get a home that they deserve.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah,
That's
and it's
huge.
crazy because the closing's on my birthday, my 33rd birthday, so, it just seems like everything's aligning. But it's been so hard. It's been so hard. But we just always knew we could do it. I always knew that we could do it.
Let me do this.
Yeah.
Anytime
I
anybody.
hate crying.
No, anytime. I thought you might. Anytime anybody
Thank
we
you.
start talking about our parents and our grandparents, everybody, that's why I bring the tissue.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you seem tough, so I didn't know if, but.
I try as much as I feel like I've overcome some of these things.
Mhm.
I always have this reminder to enjoy the good times because, there will be bad times. I mean, that's just part of life.
Mhm.
But I'm also learning to just pivot like my dad has. And I've learned that the faster you pivot, the faster you adapt to change, the better you'll be. And there's just things that you cannot control, you cannot change, and you gotta move on. But it's easier said than done. Because we become attached, we become emotionally attached to things.
That's really, I feel like that's a really important and kind of mature thing to say. And another thing I wonder is when those things happen, like you said, the $150,000 and that your dad already worked for, that he was owed, how do you deal with like I would be very angry.
Yeah.
And I wonder when you're talking about confronting these obstacles, these things that are not fair, how do you deal with that personally?
You know what's crazy? I did feel a lot of anger for a long time. And my dad still kept in contact with that person that owed him the $150,000. And it's so crazy because now I see it, right, where it's so important to keep certain relationships. So at an important time in the business, in the early stages, my dad's like, this person, I don't want to mention his name because we're on video, but he's like, call him. He can't deny a call. He cannot deny you, giving you advice after what we've been through with him. And I did, and he gave me advice, and he pivoted me to a certain contact. And it's crazy because the person that took so much away from me when I was little gave me my opportunity of a lifetime to work with a contractor that is Walsh Construction. And ever since then, I mean, we went from a $250,000 contract with Walsh that year because he directed me to a person there, to now we have $3-4 million contracts with Walsh. So it's crazy that person, at one point I did feel like I hated him, also gave me the biggest opportunity to advance in my career. Now we performed, we did all the work, right? But that's what I mean, connections are everything. That one phone call that I made because he gave me the phone number changed everything for me. And I knew that was an opportunity that I just had to fully embrace and just take full advantage of it because it was not going to happen again.
Wow.
So it's crazy, right? The person that harmed us, And again, things in business also happen where things get out of control, where it's a domino effect. And my dad always told me that he's not a bad person. Just in business, bad things things happen where you lose control.
Wow, that's really interesting. And
Yeah, how life
yeah
happens, and it brings people back around where you thought that you would never see that person again.
Yeah, I do want to get back to that and talk about you building your business, but I'm interested in the person that you were as a young girl and kind of coming up into the person that you are now. Can you tell me a little bit about what were some of the big experiences in your life, aside from, obviously you said losing your house was such a big experience, but as you were growing up, like, how did you become the person that you are now? What kind of kid were you in elementary school and middle school? Can you tell me a little bit about your younger self?
So in elementary school, my dad again has always been really big on education, and I remember in 3rd grade, I had a C on, like a progress report, I had a C, and he was just furious. And he's like, your job is to go to school and perform and do well. And that stuck with me where ever since then, I did take school very serious. I will say I was someone that defended myself a lot. Like, I was not one you could come and bully me. Like, I think you always knew, like, Jeanette was gonna, like, not gonna let anyone walk all over her, even at a young age of a 3rd grader. I played sports, so I was always pretty competitive up to high school, because I was not that good once we reached high school. But I was always kind of known for being a smart person. I was not a follower, I was more of a leader. Kind of a smart mouth, maybe some of my teachers would say. I did get in trouble here and there. I did get into a fight here and there. But all those things shape you, because, you can't be, bullied either, and like, people have a limit, and I also was gonna defend myself. So I did really, to be honest, up to high school, I think I had a great childhood, no worries, very normal life. Just 15 was when, like, things just switched, where I had to help my parents a little bit more. I mean, I started working since I was 15 years old, so you just had to grow up a little bit faster.
Can you tell me about the community that you grew up in? What was it like?
So Leiden Township, North Lake, Franklin Park, primarily Hispanic. I think very normal. I worked for the park district. To be honest, I felt very normal. But you know what? I always knew that eventually I would have to leave that nest. I don't know why, since I was little, like very young, I remember being very young and thinking, not that this is not where I belonged, but I don't know how I knew about like River Forest without ever stepping into River Forest, where I wanted bigger, better. I've always, like, and I don't know if that responsibility that my dad gave me, like, only empowered me more to want it more, to want more. And I didn't even know what type of responsibility I was looking for, but something in me, and my mom always says that I would play with I always loved playing with money, and I liked bossing my siblings around. So I don't know, like, it's so weird thinking about it now. My mom's like, you were always, like, she always says, we used to live in an apartment, then we bought our house in Leiden Township. And I was in 3rd grade when that happened, and she's like, and that I was like, thank God we're leaving this crappy apartment, like, finally a house. Like, what 3rd grader says that? I don't remember it, but my mom was like, you've always been very, like, I want responsibility, I want, manage money. And I don't know. And I do like that responsibility. It's a big one. It's stressful sometimes, but it's so rewarding at the same time. I always say I'm the happiest when I'm signing those checks to pay my subs, my employees. That's when I'm the happiest.
When you said that you were growing up, you always wanted more It reminds me a little bit of what you said about your dad kind of standing on that mountain, right? Yeah. So can you tell me, so obviously, high school was challenging for you and, in terms of like having to work and things like that. Can you tell me a little bit about, your experience through high school up to graduation?
Well, yeah, just balancing work and going to school. I clearly remember like I had to drive like the big family van to school because, we just didn't have the privilege of getting a nice car. You just drive what you have at home. And it wasn't the nicest van. And I remember like being made fun of, and you're trying to ignore that. And I remember driving it down Irving Park Road right alongside of O'Hare and telling myself, pretending it's like a nice, luxury car, and looking at the trucks inside of O'Hare saying, one day I'm going to be in there. One day I will have trucks in there. And I was 17 when I clearly remember telling myself, one day I will be working at O'Hare.
And you have a contract with O'Hare, right?
Yeah, so we've been at O'Hare for now about 6 years, continuously working there.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Can you, what are some of your favorite memories from that period of being a teenager? Do you have any like days or moments that you look back from high school that really kind of make you smile?
To be honest, I was more anxious to like get out of high school. And I remember my counselor saying, Jeanette, don't worry so much about growing up too fast. But I felt like I needed to grow up fast so I could get out of the situation that we were in. So to me, I was just kind of more in a rush and I was just like, I just need to get this done and get out of here, It was really more in college and that's when I became also a single mother in college, which that was tough for me because that was just not expected of me. So I was very, very hard on myself. Until this day, I still feel like I'm hard on myself that I had my daughter when I was 20. Just because I knew that I was not ready. And I knew the responsibility that came with it. And knowing that I was not going to be with the father, I felt a lot of guilt. I felt a lot of guilt that I'm bringing this child into the world and not giving her the best. But slowly and it's so crazy because that's when we were at our lowest point financially, and then add that you're a college student. But those were also some of my happiest moments where I thrived in college. I did really well. So where I felt in my personal life maybe I was failing, college really was therapy for me, where I was like, okay, well, you're not failing in everything. And even though my daughter, we shared a room with my sister because I never left my parents' home. I remember my dad not talking to me for one day after he found out when I told him. And he called me into his room and said, why are you crying? And then I was like, because I obviously disappointed you. He's like, stop crying. Everything's going to be okay. You're going to continue to go to college. It's going to be harder. You're going to have to work harder, but it's not impossible. And I only took 2 weeks off of college when I had my daughter and went right back. But to be honest, I had a whole army of babysitters. My siblings, my mom, my dad. They were all, I wouldn't have been able to finish college if it wasn't for all their support. I mean, my siblings would fight to take care of my daughter. She's like another sibling to them because of the, not such a big age gap. But to be honest, I wouldn't be where I'm at without my siblings and without my parents. They were a huge support. And I hate to admit it on camera because they're going to be like, I told you. And we always have that like sibling rivalry but they're the reason why I finished college, my parents and my siblings, my family. They were very supportive. And actually, I was the first one to finish college out of all of us. I beat my older brother. He took 5 years, I took 4. But yeah, I think I enjoyed college more, even though it was a bit tougher. Yeah, college to me was a little bit more enjoyable than high school.
Tell me more about that. Why did you said college was like therapy to you and you really started thriving there. Why was that?
I think it was just the environment. So I went to Dominican University. I did feel like my professors were invested in me, and I felt like I was just pushing myself academically to another level that I had never pushed myself. So I did feel like I get this. I get why it's important. I get why I need to push myself academically. And it's also important to surround yourself with people like-minded like that push you that way, where they kind of like bring out the best in you. So again, there was just very specific professors that I think they saw something in me, and they were really like, you have potential and you should really continue to do well. So I did, you know, I remember being like just super focused in college.
And so I know around this time, you know, well, it sounds like even from when you were 17, you were thinking about trucking industry or thinking about starting a business. Can you tell me about what happened, you know, during college that led you to make that decision, or how did you start your first business?
So since I was in high school, I knew that I wanted to reopen the trucking company that my dad once owned. But I remember talking to my dad, and he's like, I will help you, I will support you, but you have to finish college. You have to go to college. So I did, you know, I was just like, this is a requirement that I need to get done before I start a business. So I studied business and accounting. And at the beginning of my senior year, I incorporated the company. Because my dad's like, it's a great idea. Like, by the time you're done with your senior year, you'll be a year in business. Yeah, because he's not in college, you know, taking classes and then starting a business. I was like, what was I thinking? But again, that was even challenging, where like I'm in the middle of class, and you know, at the time I was a dispatcher too, and they're like, where's the truck? Or here's the changes to the dispatch, as you're trying to take, you know, an economics class or something.
Wow.
Yeah,
So you were already involved in the business as a dispatcher. Can you tell me a little bit about what that job entails?
Well, again, when I incorporated, I became the dispatcher, the accountant, I became everything. Mm-hmm. So when I was younger, I was a part of my dad's business just with the paperwork, you know, filling out the invoices, paying the drivers. But over here, I'm the sole owner, and I'm responsible for everything, and I'm responsible for direct, you know, and at one point it's just one truck, so it's much easier. But when you're first starting, it's very overwhelming, because I mean, I had not done it before for years. So, but dispatching is, to be honest, probably my least favorite part of the business.
Can you tell, for folks who are watching this who aren't as familiar with the trucking industry, can you tell me when you started out the business, like, what type of work were you guys doing? What did your day-to-day look like running the business?
So we are in the construction hauling industry, so it's a little bit different than over-the-road hauling. So we're specifically just working on heavy highway, sewer construction projects. Usually it's publicly funded. And again, being in the construction industry is very male-dominated. So, you know, I didn't think much of it. I think that when you're going through school, you don't think about sexism and how that affects you in the workforce, because you're not actually working. But once I started to go door to door on some of these trucking broker companies, they were all male dominated. The dispatcher was a male. Maybe just the office person was a female working. But I was 22 years old. You're going into their office. You're talking to this guy. They don't take you seriously. And they're like, what, you have one truck? You know, like how many people have one truck? Like what else do you have that, you know, of value? And that's when I also realized I needed to get certain certifications in order to have more opportunities. So the DBE program, MBWB program by the city of Chicago. So then that took me a couple of years. But I always knew that I didn't want to work for someone. My dad always told me, like, you want to work directly for the general contractor. So it was tough working for other brokers just because, to be honest, and I clearly remember one of them, like, I was telling him, like, hey, in the dispatch, you told me it was 110 an hour. And he was just very dismissive. Like, even though it was in a text message, he was just so easy. He was so easily able to just dismiss me and be like, well, it's not 110. And I'm like, but if you wrote it in a text message, just like honor your word. Like, I don't care if it was 100, but why didn't you just let me know it was 100 instead of 110? But I think, you know, it's hard being a woman in this industry and being taken seriously.
Well, you also were incredibly young,
Yeah.
right? So a woman, Latina,
Yeah.
right? How, I wonder, like, when you started having those experiences of guys just kind of dismissing you,
me.
how did you not give up? What did you tell yourself?
I think that's always been in me, that even though they were in a position of power, right? I always told myself, like, you could do better. I've always thought if I outwork, you know, you might have more money, you might, you know, even someone that has just a lot of natural abilities, but someone that just really works hard sometimes beats talent. So I always said, just keep your head straight and keep working at it. And then I started to align myself with other organizations like CASIA, where they really help you, you know, understand the power of relationships, the power of shaking someone's hand, the power of business development. And that's what I became. I became the sole business development for DCH, and I started to shake people's hands, and I always was very honest on like what my capabilities were, and if you're willing to work with me, that I would prove myself. Like, I just wanted an opportunity, and to be honest, that's how it started. Where I just always knew that was a temporary situation that I needed to go through in order to go to the next stepping stone for me, in order for me to go directly to a general contractor. It's really hard to just start a company and go directly work for a general contractor. It's baby steps. They're frustrating, but it took me about 4 years to land the contract on my own directly with a general contractor.
Tell me, how did that feel, or how did that go once you finally landed your first direct contract?
Yeah, so that was with Chicagoland Paving, Bill Bowes, which he's always been super helpful as well. And I just proved to myself, like, I know what I'm doing, and I can do this. Like, I was like, I could do this. And then I always told myself, like, slowly but surely, I did not want to take on too much where then I couldn't handle it. So I think that I've been very mature in that aspect too, of not growing too fast, not taking on too much, because as fast as you can grow, that's as fast as you could also come down. And that's always in the back of my mind, what happened to my dad. And I was like, you gotta be cautious. So I think that that's always been very mature of me, where knowing my capacity, being very transparent with my customers, and they appreciate that, like, well, Jeanette said this, and that's what she's going to give us. There's no surprises with me, I feel. And they've been able to challenge me, where they're like, Jeanette, I think you could do more, where they're pushing my capacity. And it's funny because Walsh, again, I have a great relationship with Walsh and some other estimators. And this certain estimator, I was super afraid of doing the red line, the CTA RPM project. It's a big project, it's complicated. The way that you had to bid it, I stayed away from it. I didn't even bid it. But like a year and a half later, that estimator is like, Jeanette, they're having problems getting trucks. I think that you should bid this. And I was just like, I don't want to bid this. And he's like, Jeanette, just bid it, don't bid it low, bid it at what you're comfortable. And we've done like almost $2 million there. And it's been one of the best projects we've been on. So even, again, when you work with certain people and you're building those relationships, like that estimator that I'm talking about, he saw my potential and he knew that I could do it. But I'm so conservative sometimes as well, that getting me out of my comfort zone is a little difficult. But also having the support from on their side, the GC saying, hey, we got your back if anything happens, is also helpful. And now I'm like, oh my God, what was I so afraid of? Like, we nailed it, we killed that job. And now we're going after the red line extension on the south side, That's something that we really want to participate in. So I've just had really good people also cross my paths. Professors, my parents, colleagues, that I work with. And then clients where they're like, man, she's good and she just needs a little push, and they push me. So again, I've been very lucky too, to have great people in my life.
It's interesting that you say at the beginning of your career, like, you're trying to get in the door,
Yeah.
right? And people are blocking you, and then later in your career, people are trying to pull you through the door.
Yeah.
So you must have a strong reputation. What do you feel like? You mentioned a little bit of this, but right now in your career, what do you feel like your real strengths are that set you apart from maybe other folks who do this kind of work?
Transparency. We deliver what we say we're going to deliver. I'm very knowledgeable as well with the rules. I've become an expert in what I do. And to be honest, I think also with my second tier subcontractors that I need them just as much as they need me. It's an equal relationship right there. And sometimes I feel like other people might not see that. But again, I've also been very honest with them. I've earned their trust. And they also know that I'm always looking to make things better for us in the industry. Because I will say 98% of my workforce is Latino or Latina. We've been able to bring on more women-owned truckers. I mean, they kick ass. They do great. We have about 6 companies actually at O'Hare right now, solely working for us that are women-owned businesses. So I'm just trying to do the same thing that I'm doing for myself, but everyone else that works behind me. Mm-hmm. And again, if everyone wins, it's just even the contractor wins. Mm-hmm. So I think it's, my professionalism, my honesty, and just being able to deliver what's kind of set me apart from others.
And yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Hearing, hearing how you've just described your life and your work so far. Do you have kind of you talked about relationships and you talked a lot about your subcontractors. Can you tell me a little bit about kind of your philosophy? Like how do you approach a relationship? What do you bring to relationships, in business?
Look, I really do think I'm an open book. I'm an open book, and again, just being transparent and honest really builds a strong relationship in anything. And I always think about how I was treated when I was a second tier subcontractor, and I don't want to do that to them. And I also think about that was my dad as well. So a lot of my second tier subcontractors have the same barriers, the language barrier, the not knowing exactly all the rules, but they're the hardest working people you could ever find. So just building some bridges on some of the obstacles that they have has been important to me. So I can honestly say, like, not only do I have a great reputation with my customers, I do think I also have built a good relationship and reputation with my second tier subcontractors, because it's so important. It's so important, and yeah, I think that's what kind of set me apart, and that's why I've been able to be successful. And that just means that not always is honesty what you want to hear, but it's better than lying. And I always think, like, I know sometimes certain things are unfair. Even the trucking industry has so many things that they can improve on, and we've been able to improve on some things, but things that we can't change, and I have to communicate it to them. Look, I'm just being honest, and this is what it is, but I don't like to lie. I like to be very transparent.
So I'm wondering a little bit, this is one of the last questions, and you can feel free to share anything else that you want to share. So being a Latina in the trucking industry, like, what do you hope for your future, and what do you hope for the future of other Latinas or other women in the industry?
Well, for myself, I want to continue to grow. I want to continue to bring other women-owned truckers with me. I hope that we can continue to break some of these glass ceilings and change the face of the construction industry. And even though we've made progress, there's still so much more progress that needs to be made. And I am very hopeful. I am very hopeful that, change is coming, and that we can break more barriers. But I know it's not going to be easy, but nothing good in life is easy, so bring it.
That's great. I love that. I always give people any time at the end. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about, or kind of any final messages you want to share with anybody who watches this interview?
I think the best advice I've ever been given is there's no greater investment than to yourself. So bet on yourself. And I think that there's no regrets as a 22-year-old betting on myself. It's not going to be easy. But trust me, and I'm only 33, and I can only think what I'm about to endure in my future years, but thinking back the last 10 years, which I feel like I've not had a normal last 10 years, like my 20s were, maybe not so stressful, or trying to build a business, right? But I wouldn't take it back for anything in this world. I wouldn't take it back. All the tears, all the worries, all the late nights, all the hustle, I wouldn't take it back. Like, I feel like this is what I was meant to do, and I really am optimistic of like what else the world has for me, because I know that I know I'm not just supposed to be a trucking business owner. I know somewhere I'm going to do something else. I just don't know what yet. But, I love trucking. But I do see myself venturing into other things as well.